Another big challenge that I'm hearing from university recruiting teams right now is this hard to fill location challenge. So let's say, Jinx, that I am trying to hire early talent into locations that are either rural, have a high cost of living, or just aren't those destination cities, as it were, for new grads. It feels almost impossible to build strong pipelines there. So let me ask, how would you coach me through building a location strategy when I'm facing that type of uphill battle?
Geographic location has actually really grown in importance compared to previous years on the employer side. What's fascinating is that we do see location preferences from students. I bet everyone here on the line has had that conversation. Gen Z has been more particular than previous generations, and we see both the coasts, east and west, have been more popular than say the Midwest. You've also seen some political shifts in different states that have impacted hiring volumes or impacted whether students want to go to those states. I am curious, Hannah, what have been some of the biggest triggers that you've seen that are pushing teams to move potentially towards a more regional based recruiting strategy?
There are really two big inputs that I'm seeing that are signaling kind of a shift towards more regional strategies. The first one, it's happening out of necessity. So budget cuts, travel bans, smaller teams are actually forcing a lot of UR leaders to recruit closer to their office hubs, just to stretch out those limited resources that we all know are existing right now. One creative tactic I've actually seen that some companies have employed is to train and empower their local business line employees. So, folks that are already in the region to actually help support engagement when recruiters can actually not travel. The second input is a bit more strategic, especially for companies that are hiring in rural or harder to sell locations. Recruiters want to make sure that they're sourcing local talent. So students who are already familiar with or willing to relocate to those areas, instead of trying to convince someone from across the country to move somewhere that they've never been.
Those two dynamics actually feed into each other a little bit. When budgets tighten, relocation stipends, potentially housing assistance are often the first perks to get cut because they are expensive, right? And they cost a lot of money for employers to go down that route. So the reality is, even if a candidate is interested in a potentially rural location or moving across the country to a separate city, if you can't financially support their move, it becomes a much more harder thing to sell. And so for a lot of our members, we've actually put together a rural recruiting playbook, and what it does is it actually shares the top incentives that actually move the needle and strategies to authentically sell hard to fill locations. The piece of advice that I actually give a lot of my members is a very simple one. It's look local first. And it's something that it's been a trend over the past couple of years that at times companies have been a bit begrudging to go that direction, but we've seen a lot of ROI and a lot of sort of savings when companies go that direction recruiting. But what we found is that candidates who are already in the area or in that specific region, or again already might have a personal connection to it, are much more likely to stay and be successful. And as a bonus, it actually saves your teams money on travel and relocation while overall boosting your retention odds. When it comes to hard to fill locations, the biggest mistake we see teams making is treating them like any other opening, right? Posting and hoping, throwing something up on LinkedIn or Handshake versus actually building a location specific strategy. And again, this is where we are seeing a core strategy potentially come back into play for companies who may have been more school agnostic in years prior. So here's how we traditionally break it down when we're having these conversations with our members. First and foremost, you need to identify schools that naturally have a geographic or cultural ties to that location. So students who are more likely to want to live and work in that geographic location. Second, we recommend crafting a really compelling narrative around the opportunity. And this is beyond just the job description. So let's think about what is the quality of life, what is the career growth, the community feel, cost of living advantages. There's a great paradox that we find in the relocation or housing conversation. It's that cost of living is the single most important quality for students, and yet they love moving to big cities. And so what that tells me is that students probably don't have a full understanding of what cost of living really means and how to actually make that tangible in their minds. But B, that it is a lever that you could potentially utilize if you explain it in the correct format. So something to potentially leverage. And then lastly, and this is the third category here, is adjust your event strategy. So for hard to fill roles, it often makes sense to double down on high touch engagement. So in reality, let's think smaller networking events, alumni panels, even virtual spotlights on what it's like to live and work in XYZ location. But it is where event strategy can really play a big goal, or really play a big have a big impact on overall student interaction.